Alright, first video on the new virtual reality channel. So all the virtual reality stuff will just keep over here, and then nobody can just use that rhetoric as a problem anywhere else. It'll just be this channel, this guy you can argue with on virtual reality, nowhere else. Probably I'll let the text open for a while, but eventually, you know, it's really not going to be debated in text. You either make a video or you don't, but it's not going to be debated in little blotches of text. It's just a waste of time. So anyway, on to the videotape, the virtuous pornographer.
Okay, this is why virtual reality fails and why it's fucking bullshit. First of all, it requires an infrastructure. However you're going to hook people up to virtual reality requires a physical fucking infrastructure that will have to be maintained by people who do not fucking exist in virtual reality, which means...
Okay, now I've probably only answered this question at least 4 times, 5 times, 6 times in videos. We already have robotics now. We are flying airplanes in Iraq from underground in the middle of the United States. We're doing that, okay? That technology already exists. Robotics. So the idea, even if we couldn't create a self-sustaining system, which I think we can do. The space station exists up in space and it does a lot of things all on its own. Yeah, they have to import some food up there and take away some waste and garbage and whatnot. So there has to be some work done, but it doesn't require a lot of maintenance. And they've even gone to a robot now. They actually have a robot up there now that is going to be able, you know, have arms they'll control from inside, and it'll do things. It'll function as a human being on the outside. So there's no reason why people in virtual reality couldn't control robots on the outside of virtual reality that did what you call work. You know, whatever that required, whether it was farming or thising or thating. Obviously, I think there'd be systems for sustaining people in virtual reality that will be the straightest line economy possible. So the very idea of farms and all that stuff might not even exist. I mean, it might just all be growing algae in you know, cylindrical tanks, and you know, just gleaning enough carbohydrate from that to augment our human blood supply. Remember, you know, bottom line is we don't eat food, we eat blood. I mean, when you really think about it, when you cut it down to its basics, we eat blood. Alright? That's what we eat. Our body eats blood. Alright? So all you gotta do is have the right chemistry in the blood to maintain a body. All this whole intestinal, all these organs, a lot of them have no real function. Alright? They only function because of the crude manner in which we have to augment that blood supply. And we can find more efficient ways to do that. So, continuing.
These people who do not exist in virtual reality, meaning the people that maintain the machines, maintain the programs, grow the fucking food that has to be converted into liquid so that it can be fucking put into the people's...
Well, like I say, you're just not using your imagination. This technology, some of this technology already exists. And the fact that you start thinking going out 20 years or 40 years or 60 years or hundreds of years into the future, the technology of automation is going to be, they already have, they're a few years away from a friggin' goddamn artificial placenta, for Christ's sakes. I mean, you're not even trying to use your imagination.
Bodies who are laying there in their little pods enjoying their fucking fantasy world has to be done in the real world by real people.
Alright, well, I'm going to skip past this part of your argument because you're just redundant. You just redundantly keep saying the same crap over and over that's completely defeated by the fact that automation and robotics can take care of any external maintenance that's required. Human beings will not be required to go into coal mines or do this or synthesize that or do any of this other crap. They'll all be able to do it by controlling external mechanical devices if that's necessary. I'd still argue that a fully automated, very reliable system can eventually, future, be built. No problem. We're not that fucking complicated. All right, we're chemistry. Synthesize the chemistry, you've synthesized the physical existence. So I'll move on to see if there's something else relevant that you bring up.
Begin with. So virtual reality is only going to be a solution for some of the people. And
yeah, well, that's why I've sort of argued that it's an all or nothing thing, just to prevent that very scenario where it will only belong to some of the people. Virtual reality is going to happen eventually. I think instead of it being 100 or 150 years away, we can make it 40 years away or 30 years away by socially investing in it. But it's going to happen eventually, and the idea is to put it in the hands, well, eventually, if we survive. Obviously, we only going to be living here about, what, 7 more days? I mean, come on, we're in big fucking trouble right the fuck now. And that's part of what I wish you would address in these videos, is that, you know, the real question is what future can you possibly see? What scenario can humanity live in without virtual reality? If they're not in a safe environment where they can't hurt each other, how can they possibly gain, you know, how can we possibly have technical progress and maintain the same human nature where we're out to kill each other an awful lot? The bottom line is we will kill each other, and we'll do it more and more effectively, and eventually that will lead to our annihilation. So I don't think there's any possibility that our violent nature and technology have any future together. The only way we can save the human race is to go to some environment that eliminates that equation, that prevents human beings from being able to do any real harm in the real world.
obviously going to cost money to exist in virtual reality, because you'll have to have the wealth to give to someone and say, here, maintain.
Yeah, well, that's sort of my argument. No, I mean, if you take the two scenarios, providing a life for a human being, it requires these things called riches. It requires enrichments, a lot of physical enrichments and enhancements and protections from nature and all this crap. And in virtual reality, it's just software. It's pennies on the dollar. So once you've maintained the physical body, all you need is the calories, all right? So all you need is the bare minimum to maintain a body. So you can change the scenario from where a life costs thousands of dollars per year in resources to pennies per year in resources. You can afford to have more people because you can maintain them over the long term so much more efficiently and cheaply. Besides the fact that they won't need antidepressants and Viagra and all this other crap that people need in this real world to even try to be happy. I mean, I don't think you're going to have too many people playing virtual reality as alcoholics. Okay, so I think reality fails, okay, by comparison. It's going to fail dismally by comparison. There's no, there's just no contest.
It's a fucking fantasy. A goddamn fantasy and a waste of time.
Yeah, well, like I said, you can say it's a fantasy and a waste of time. Like I said, it's going to happen eventually. And it will just be owned by the privileged if we don't do it on purpose the right way. So whatever, and it's hardly like I said, your opinion of it is not based on anything rational. You're just saying somehow reality is better, and as I've pointed out, in virtual reality, you could play the game. You could play reality as the game. You could live the same mundane existence, doing your laundry and washing your dishes and going to work and having to make a living and paying taxes and having a succubus wife and going through all this crap. You could live the same mundane bullshit existence in virtual reality. But there's no fucking way a rational person would do that. They'd start pulling weeds right away. They'd say, well, I don't want starving people in Africa, and I don't want this happening, and I want all these realities. They'd start plucking out of reality. And once you started pulling those weeds, you'd find that most of your fucking life was a goddamn weed.
Stopping being selfish, stopping being ignorant. Maybe everybody should pick up a few more books and read them.
Yeah, well, I'm not against picking up books, but if they're going to just be phantasmagorical stories about human beings being more than bacteria with brains, then it's a fail, okay? Because that's what human beings need. There's no huge education. Humanity doesn't need a huge education. You know, there's 5 or 6 facts of life they have to know, and that's all you have to know. It's not, life is not that fucking complicated. Living it productively is not that fucking complicated. You know, but where it fails is people don't understand their own human nature. All we are is desire machines, and the idea is to make the line between deprivation, desire, and satisfaction as short and as straight as possible, without taking away the flavor of the chase. And virtual reality can do that. It can leave all the best parts of life, the horny desire, want stuff, okay, the good chase, and it just takes out the weeds. It just takes out the crap you don't need, the failure parts of life.